Hi, this is Dov Baron, and you are listening to Awakened Nation with Brad Solis. Stay tuned because there's some really juicy stuff coming up.
A huge shift is taking place on planet Earth. People seem to be waking up. Tired of the way things used to be, they are creating something brand new and changing the world we live in. My name is Brad Solis, and I get to sit down with the next generation of idea makers, the disruptors, and the game changers. Everyday people, just like you and me, from all over, who are doing amazing things. Welcome to Awakened Nation.
Dov, welcome back to the show, man.
Thanks, mate. It's been way too long.
I know. Every time I reach out, I'm thinking, I got to get Dov on the show. Boom, something else comes along, and I will stop doing that. I will make sure you're on each season, if that's okay with you.
That's okay with me, mate. I always enjoy our conversations, whether in person or on a show. That's always great.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, you're in for a real treat. I love this guy. He's been through so many things. If you caught his interview in season 1, you know that he fell off a cliff 120 feet to his death and lived and been through so many things. I'm going to read your bio in a minute, but Dov, what can I say about you? You have upped your game, and I've noticed it, and I wanted to talk about that today.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Okay.
You can talk about whatever you want. Up my game. I don't even know what that means, but sure, I'll take that.
I'll take it. Right. Yeah. I'm going to read this. Dov Baron is the founder and CEO of Dov Baron International. He is the preeminent expert in helping leaders create life and work meaning. And he does it really well, by the way, folks. I've been on the receiving end of that. His models and strategies of the emotional source code and the anatomy of meaning are used by leaders in business and government worldwide. Dov has been named a top 30 global leadership guru 5 times and an Inc. magazine top leadership speaker twice. He is the creator and the host of 2 popular podcasts, Leadership and Loyalty, which has been named the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives by Apple Podcasts, and Curiosity Bites. I love this show. Curiosity Bites, which has featured hundreds of hours of interviews with top leaders, scientists, theologians, military intelligence officers, and artists. He has written for or been interviewed by many media outlets, including CEO World, CNN, El Italia, Entrepreneur, and Fox. And you've been the author of several books, but once again, welcome to the show, Dov.
Thank you so much, Brad. Pleasure to be here.
You gave a speech at the United Nations. Do you want to talk about that for a minute? Because I've been to the United Nations as a guest. It's pretty awe-inspiring, but to stand on that stage and give a presentation, what was that like, man?
Somewhat unreal, but it was prophetic, to be honest with you, because that was 2015. Mm-hmm. Trump and Clinton were going up against each other at that time. Mm-hmm. And we were there. I was invited to speak with someone else, Tony Mack, who was somebody who very kindly suggests that I was the one who de-radicalized him. He was an ex-neo-Nazi. He ran war, which was white Aryan race. In Canada, took the Canadian government to the Supreme Court twice. And he was a neo-Nazi and Holocaust denier, etc. And so we were invited to speak there together. And the reason we were invited to speak together is because of the work that he and I had done together. And during the interview, as part of a panel, there were several, but this was a panel piece. And the person who was running the panel said, how could you possibly help somebody who advocated for your eradication from the planet?
Yeah.
And I said, well, you see a neo-Nazi. I did not. And they said, what do you mean? I said, what I saw was somebody who was highly intellectual, highly intelligent, highly articulate, highly creative. And I saw me. And this person was puzzled and said, but you're Jewish. You weren't a neo-Nazi. I said, no, of course not. But I was all the other things I just said. I just found my avenue and he found his. And so when we sat together, one of the things we were talking about was the de-radicalization of the far right. This is again 2015, before it had all blown up. Yeah. And we said, this is coming. Here it is, it's coming. And they want to know, how do we de-radicalize? And I said, they wanted a common language. And I said, if you try and find a common language, it won't work. And I said to Tony, who was sitting right next to me, what was the de-radicalized language I used on you, Tony? And he went, you didn't. And I said, no. What did we talk about for the first 10 minutes? And he said, oh, that's easy. Monty Python. We talked about the parrot sketch. And I said, yes, the language of de-radicalization is rapport. It's finding out what we have in common across the vast difference we have. I knew, because of his background, where he was from where his father was from, I knew he would likely have an English sense of humor. And his father, being 10 years older than me, would have also grown up with Monty Python. I knew that that was the common ground. And as a result, that man has now gone on to start an organization called The Cure for Hate. He wrote a best-selling book by that name, and they've made a documentary about his return to Auschwitz. So that has become an award-winning movie. So it's stepping into that, looking at what we have in common, which is the basis of my cultural work, which is we need to find and create cultures of belonging where people can belong, rather than this desperate need we have in society today, which is to fit in.
I think people really want to be right. You know what I mean? That, when they're arguing and fighting, whether it's the radical left or it's the radical right, we stand and we stomp our feet and we gnash our teeth, and it's like, I'm not moving. And who knew that Monty Python would bring us together?
Well, that's it. It was very interesting for me, even as a kid, because I grew up in Northern England, extremely poor. Mm-hmm. And here were these Cambridge boys who were highly intellectual, who came up with Monty Python, and it appealed to everybody across the board. It was a great example of how you unify people. And so, of course, I would use that. And it's really important for us to understand that, yes, as you said, people want to be right, but more than they want to be right, human beings are tribal. We want to belong. Wow. But if we don't have a place to actually authentically belong, we will trade our authenticity for approval in order to fit in. But when you fit in, you have to disenfranchise parts of yourself. So Tony, who I was talking about, I spoke at the UN with, he had to disenfranchise his whole compassion, his empathy, his softness in order to fit in. And they gave him a voice, and that was understandable. But when we attach ourselves to being right, we're fitting in. When we belong, we want the space to express our magnificence, all of who we are.
That's powerful, man. It really is. Fantastic. I've always been impressed with your work, because to get people to talk across the aisles, I mean, that's not easy. How did you get started in this? And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, take some notes here today, but Dov and I have known each other probably 15 years now.
Yeah,
we had met at a John Childers event, and I
think it's longer, mate. We're old.
We're getting there. I'm almost ready for Social Security. What impressed me the most was you were authentic about your story, breaking down and breaking through, but also you studied everything from neuro-linguistic programming to coaching to you name it. Mm-hmm. And when I say you took it up a notch, or you leveled up, both your podcasts are just phenomenal to listen to.
Thank you.
Number one, I've been on the receiving end of some of your coaching. I've seen you coach people. It's powerful what you do. You get to the authentic self and bring out the best in people. Very cool. But when I say you took it up a notch, you're leveling up or whatever, your intensity and the energy of the work you're doing has almost doubled. It's just this amazing transformation of boom, here we have so much more to talk about. You know what I mean? And you keep going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's what I mean by that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that, a friend of mine challenged me, who was a coach as well. He was coaching me, and he said, "Where are you holding back?" And I said, I don't think I do. And he's like, no, where are you holding back? Where are you trying to not put them off? And I went, oh, well, that's easy, right? I said, I don't go to the depth of what I do. I don't tell people about the fact that I'm a polymath. I don't share all these different insights because I'm afraid it will overwhelm people. And he said, oh, it will. And I said, okay. And he said, do you care? And I said, yeah. And he goes, no, you don't need to care about that. What you need, and this is a line I use all the time, is you need to build a thinner fence. That means push people off the fence in either direction. It's okay. So now I openly speak about the fact that I'm a polymath, that I've studied metaphysical studies, Vedanta, Hindu philosophy, Buddhism, the Tao, Gnostic and Coptic Christianity, Kabbalah, Jungian psychology, neuroscience, and quantum physics, and then wrote a thesis on personal emotional resonance fields that is at the root of the work that I do, which is on the emotional source code and the anatomy of meaning. That's a lot to swallow, but what all you have to go to is, what does it mean for me? What it means for you is you're living inside a bubble you created as an identity in order to survive the insane asylum called your childhood. Right. And you can say your parents were great or wonderful or terrible. It doesn't matter. The point is that you've developed this identity, and that identity is not you. And until you confront that, you'll never live at the level of magnificence and impact that you can have in the world. That's my job. That's what I do. You can't see it. Why? Well, because a fish can't explain water. We're all swimming around in our own poop and we can't recognize it. Yeah. My job is to show you what it is, find the disenfranchised parts, bring them to the front, and you become magnificent.
You just said a mouthful, man, because I always say this. Does a fish think it's swimming, or does it think it's flying? You know, that's the illusion. It doesn't see the water. You're right. You caught my attention a couple of weeks ago or a week ago before we were about to record this. And I'm going to roll this video, but you talked a little bit about woo-woo stuff, but it wasn't woo-woo. So we're going to roll the tape.
We're all living in a vibrational field. And this is not woo-woo. I'm talking quantum physics now. There's nothing woo here. We're all living in a frequency, in a wave formula frequency. Now, I want you to think about it like this. If you can remember what an old radio set is like, you twisted the dial and you tuned it to a certain frequency. If you tuned it to, I'm making up a number, 95.3, you might have got pop music. Okay. If you turned it to 94.6 and you didn't get pop music, were you upset? No, you know it's not on that wavelength, right? You understand that. And if you know where the heavy rock is, you go to the heavy rock. And if you want pop, you know where the pop is. You know where those things are. But you don't bother doing that to yourself. You don't bother to check, what am I resonating? Because human beings and everything in the universe, according to quantum physics, is a resonance. It is a frequency modulation. And if I take a tuning fork in this hand, and it's a D tuning fork, and I hit it, and I hold another tuning fork in this hand that's a D tuning fork, and I don't do anything to this one ringing will make that one ring. But if this one's a C and this one's a D and I ring this, nothing's going to happen. You have to get into resonance with people. And you can only get into resonance by being in resonance with yourself. How do we do that? We get out of competition and we step back into collaboration. We find a way to come together.
When you said this, I've studied a little bit about quantum physics. Heisenberg's theory and all these other things. But when you really, truly understand it, Dov, you really are stepping into this much wider arena of possibility. Like before that, you had limitations in your mind. And I'm just paraphrasing this. Before, when you understood the world, I always like to draw that circle and then a tiny slice. And that's what you know. You know that you know it. Maybe you're a mechanic, or maybe you're whatever. You're a graphic designer. You know that. And then next to it is a tiny little slice. And right there is the stuff you don't know, but you know it exists, such as, there's something called a neuroscientist, but you don't know what it is. I mean, maybe you do, Dov, but there's that little slice. The rest of the pie, which is 99% of it probably, is the stuff that we don't know, that we don't even know exists.
Yes.
And so with quantum physics and understanding quantum physics, we basically shut off the brain and our limitations that we placed upon ourselves, and we step into this bigger world of anything's possible. So do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's hard sometimes for people to understand, that letting go of what I have placed meaning on through these years.
Yeah, happily. So the thing of, the analogy I give in the video there is to understand that if your radio set using, for old people like me, if you remember radio sets and you tuned your dial to 99.3, maybe that was the pop station. And if you changed it to 103.5, you got the hard rock, and maybe 105, you got the talk. You didn't get upset when you tuned it to the pop station and it got pop. You knew that that's what it was. And you didn't get upset when you tuned to the talk station and you got talk. The thing is, you don't know those other things are broadcasting at the same time. They're all broadcasting at whatever time it is, but you're just tuned into whatever you're tuned into. Well, you are a frequency modulation. Your body is a vibrational field. This is, again, not woo-woo. This is neuroscience and quantum physics combined. Your brain operates on electrical current. That creates a field, and all electrical current creates an electrical field. And that field, as an example, using the Heart Math Institute's work, has a donut effect, meaning there's an energy field that spreads out around you that pulls to it and repels from it. In other words, you're tuning to one station, you don't hear the other, so you become blind to it. And it's that's so important for you to understand, that there is a vast, vast reality beyond what you see. Simple example is, if I hold up a black vase and I say to you, what color is it? You're likely to say black, of course, right? But if I say to you, what color is it not? What will you say? You might say green or red or blue. And my answer is, actually, the only color it's not is black. That's why it reflects black. And you go, what? And I go, go read the physics of vision, the physics of color, and you'll understand that. So the thing you're claiming as reality is the thing that's not there, and everything else is there, but you're so focused in on it that you see that as a reality. And that's a great example of understanding how limited our perception is.
Mind blown.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I went to college for art and design, and that was the first thing they taught us. We had a year of color theory. Well, the first year we only worked in black and white. The second year we were allowed to play with color, and then you start to understand color theory and the science of color and how color motivates. So this is taking me back and shaking me awake a little bit to remind me, hello. Yeah, it's the absence of that color. It's reflecting into our light, our eyes, basically. They say,
what else are we not seeing? What else are we not observing? What else are we not aware of at any possible level? You're looking at your life partner and you're going, you are a biatch, or you are an a-hole. But what if you're not? What if you're seeing nothing? What if you're not seeing all the rest?
Yeah.
I'll give you an example from a relationship, and this is easy to think of. Think of something that irritates you about your partner that you've asked them to do, but they don't do. Now, let me ask you, how many times did they do it? Your focus is on how many times they didn't do it, so you don't notice how many times they do it. So let's say it's take out the garbage on Tuesday afternoons, right? And you notice that they didn't take it out, and you're bloody furious, but they took it out 18 times and they missed once, and your focus is on the once. Your mind is focused on being right. So when you talked earlier about being right, you're absolutely correct. In the mind is looking for evidence of that which it believes to be true, and the mind is looking for evidence of that which it believes to be true, even if what it believes is completely false, and it will ignore evidence to the contrary. Because being right is not about my ego, although that is what it's about. It's about survival. If I'm right, then I know I'm safe in the world. Well, how about you take a step back and go, do I need to be right in order to survive? I mean, really, do I need to be right about this? No.
Yeah. I also think it boils down to, you have to pick your battles, especially if you're married. You really have to pick your battles. And is this really a reflection of her or me? I always ask that question. Is this really, am I supposed to learn? What am I supposed to learn from this? Let's
I think
be
you
honest.
can take it a step further. I talk about this in my course called Creating Cultures of Belonging. And that is, I live by mirror philosophy. There is nothing that exists in the world that I can perceive that isn't a reflection of me. There's lots of things that I can't perceive because they're not a reflection of me. So again, It's like that black color, right? I can only see what is reflecting of me. So when I look at Donald Trump and I'm pissed off, what's that about me? I look at Joe Biden and I'm pissed off. What is that about me? I look at this person or that person or this situation or that situation. This is me. Now, you say, well, I'm not like that. My partner is very disorganized and I'm very organized. And I go, okay, where are you disorganized? Are you disorganized in your emotion? Are you disorganized in your rationale? How are you disorganized? You may have the shelves all organized. You may have the files all organized, but where are you disorganized? Everybody is reflecting you. And this is key. Little proviso here. You or your history. So what is this reflecting so I can go, oh, this is like the situation when I was X years old. And that's why it rubs me so hard.
Yeah.
So I need compassion for myself. I need compassion for my partner. And I need to communicate with vulnerability to my partner. Here's what happens when it pulls me back in time to that. And your partner will go, oh, shit, really? I love you to bits. I don't want to do that to you. I'm sorry. You know what? I'm going to make a greater effort around that, as opposed to you nagging me to death. I'm happy to step in and come at this from a place of love.
Once again, mind blown. And here's the funny part. I mean, I've done a lot of work on myself, and my girlfriend and I, we still have a few moments where we're like, and yesterday was a great example. I won't go into details, but she basically asked me, well, why did you do that? Why did you do that? And I answered completely authentically, apologized, and just told her the truth of what I was feeling in the moment for something I didn't do. And she goes, thank you. That is the first time I didn't have to pull that out of you. You were completely honest. You were on point. And now we can move on. Yeah, that was amazing. And I'm just standing there going, all right, where are the applause? It's like, that was a milestone for me. But we do that, she's, I get upset with her about stuff, but then I sit back and I go, oh yeah, that reminds me of this. And let's talk about this. I feel like these lessons keep coming up, but they're lesser and lesser and lesser in the triggering component or the upset, because now we recognize that we're like, oh yeah, that's my mom, that's my dad, that's my brother or sister that tortured me, or that voice from my teachers, telling me I'm never going to amount to anything. But these lessons keep coming up. Am I right?
I think it's important for us to all grasp this, because I just introduced one of my clients who actually has been my longest every week client. So she's never missed a week in 10 years. Right? I've got clients I've been with longer. I've got clients I've been with 20 years, but she will not miss a session. Need it or not, she's going to be there she has a time and nobody else gets that time. It's hers, and she will not let me give it anybody else. Wow. And I introduced her to somebody, and this person made a snide comment. They go, how messed up do you have to be to go every week? And she said very powerfully, she just said, how messed up do you have to be to not realize you always need to grow? It's not about being messed up. It's about always wanting to step into a greater level of magnificence. Now, what does that mean? It means very simply this. You have shit and you're going to go into therapy, or you're going to go coaching, or whatever it is you do. And that's great. And you're going to get greater level of insight. But here's the thing to understand. At an emotional source code level, those issues don't go away. What happens is the neural pathways stop connecting. So the trigger is there, but you don't jump into it. It doesn't pull you along. May I give you an example?
Absolutely, please.
So I'll give you an example. When my wife and I have just celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary. You know, Ren, you met my bride. We just celebrated our 25th anniversary 2 weeks ago. And when we were first dating, she called me from work and she said, "Oh, Colin wants to go for dinner." Now, Colin was a ex-roommate who was, what's the nice way of saying this? A horn dog? Yes, that's as nice as I can get. He's a slut. So he would often have 3 or 4 girlfriends on the go at any given time. Now, is that judgmental? Yes. Is that socially? Am I supposed to say that kind of stuff? Probably not, but it's okay. I would say that stuff to his face, and he knew that, and we'd laugh about it. Anyway, he wanted us to go for dinner, and I said, "Great, I love Colin. He's a fun guy. We'll go for him." And she says, "Yeah, but he wants us to meet his girlfriend." And I'm like, "Will it be the same one?" Because he's all the time. And she went, no, he really wants us to meet her. He's in love. And I'm like, "Oh, absolutely. I've got to meet this woman. Like, she's got to have some magical formula." So we go for dinner, and we have dinner with them. And at the end of the evening, we're driving home, and my wife says, my then girlfriend, but my wife now, says to me, "What did you think of Jemima?" And I said, "Oh my goodness, I thought she was really sexy. I don't pull any punches. I tell the truth." And my wife went, "Really? Like, why?" And I said, "She just is." And my wife said, "But you like women of color, and she isn't a woman of color." And I said, "No, but she's Mediterranean. She's got that olive skin, and I really like that too." And she goes, "As much as you like women of color?" And I said, "No, but I really like it." Said, "Oh, okay." And she sits there a few more minutes, and she said, "But you said she's really sexy. What else is it?" She goes, "Because I know you like curvy women, and she's not curvy." And I go, "No, but she's athletic. She's got those nice sweeps in her quads and in her shoulders, and I find that very sexy." And she goes, "Yeah, but you said very sexy. She's not a woman of color. She's not curvy. So why did you say very sexy?" And I said, "Oh, that's easy." And she said, "What?" I said, "She's nuts." And she said, "What do you mean?" And you're telling me that you find nuts very sexy? And I said, "Absolutely." She goes, "So if you were single, you'd date her?" I said, 10 years ago, I'd have bloody married her. And she says, "So if you were single today, would you date her?" I go, "Hell no." I understand the trigger. It connects to my childhood, but I don't have to go there. I can be fully aware of all the things that it triggers in me and still not step into going down an old road. But if I don't have that awareness, if I've not done that work, I'm madly in love on a path of self-destruction. Now, you think about that in anything in your life. When have you done that in business? When have you done that in a business partnership? When have you done that in a hiring? You've done it all kinds of places where you've gone in without thinking about, what is this in me? Because most of us are only hiring ourselves. And we go, "I can't believe it. I hired this guy and I thought he was going to do this." Like, do you do that? No. Well, you hired somebody who was like you, as opposed to hiring somebody who's not like you. So you're disorganized and you hired another disorganized person. Is that their fault or yours? You hired because you went with what was at the impulse level of what you were in resonance with, rather than what you needed. Our greatest challenge is we surround ourselves with people who are like-minded. That bullshit idea from the New Age is surround yourself with like-minded people is a terrible piece of advice. And you live in a bloody bubble if you do that.
Wow. Folks, if you're feeling a little triggered, just want to let you know, I'm feeling a little triggered here too. You just laid out some of my stuff. The first round with the friend's girlfriend, and I say this too to some people. Don't be so quick when you're young to jump into certain relationships, because these are reflections of traumas from early on. And I look at some of the choices, the dates I've gone on, the business partnerships, and I realize what I chose in my 20s, I would never choose today in my 60s.
No.
And it boils down to, I see it, like you said, but I don't chase it. I sit there and go, and you see somebody, going after that, and you just smile and you go, "Oh, you're about to learn a very valuable lesson I learned in my 40s."
Right.
um, and it's wow, it's powerful work that you do. How do we get a hold of you if we need to get if anybody needs to reach out to you and hire you and talk to you?
Thank you for asking. You can find me at dovbaron.com, DOVBARON.com. I'm also, as you mentioned earlier, I'm on LinkedIn. Do a lot of work on there. I post every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. I have 2 podcasts, as you mentioned. You can find me on Apple Podcasts or any of the podcast platforms. I write for Medium under the Curious Leader. I write for LinkedIn. You can find me there too. I have a YouTube channel. I mean, basically, put in Dov Baron, and
Yes.
it's going to come up, and it's not going to be anyone else doing it. But on top of all that, simplicity. You want to get in touch with me? Write to me. Write to Dov, D-O-V, at dovbaron.com. I know I'm insane. I give out my email address. Write to me, and I'll tell you why. Because I have 2 podcasts, and I know what it's like. So Brad has this podcast. He puts it together. I know the work, the energy, the effort goes into it. And it's not sitting there chatting with somebody. That's the easiest part. All the stuff that goes on before and after is vast.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's a one-way street. You get to receive, but does Brad know whether you're making a difference, whether he's making a difference? Not unless you tell him. So I want you to write to him and write to me and tell us what you got out of this show and tell us what you're going to do with it. And then don't hoard it. Rate, review, subscribe to the show, and share it with other people so that they can get that value too. Because the information is worth the hole in the donut if you don't apply it. Application is what creates the transformation. That's what we got to do. Man,
thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Yeah, there's a lot of work here. Some people don't know.
Well, there's no reason they would. And so it's like awakening to that. It's like, wow, really? Like it's a half hour or an hour show. How much time goes into that? Times it by a minimum of 10.
Yeah.
And people go, really? And I go, yeah. And by the way, guess how much I get paid for this job? Yeah, the big hole in the donut. Right.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing.
Man, you said a mouthful. I wind up like per episode, especially if it's a long one, it's minimum of 4 to 5 hours of editing, prepping, and promoting. So minimum.
Yeah.
Sometimes
and you
it's more.
These beautiful graphics that go along with it. You do this high quality show. You have phenomenal guests. You've got it like there's a bunch of stuff goes on before the person ever gets to air. And then a bunch of stuff that happens once you've recorded. So it's really important that you let Brad know the value of it for you and share it with others.
Thank you, Dov. I appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Let's talk about the emotional source code and the anatomy of meaning. These are not only great titles, they lure me in, my friend.
Thank you.
Seductive, as you like to say.
Delicious.
It's like the seduction part of it. I remember the first time you used the word about it seduces us, it's seduction and things like this when you were talking about dysfunction. So
yes.
I'm curious about these 2 platforms you speak from.
So the anatomy of meaning is the work that I do with individuals and organizations. And it goes like this. If you want to understand it in the simplest form, it's this. Think of it this way. Mm-hmm. The person who controls the meaning for the tribe controls the movement of that tribe. So let me give you an example. There are people who are today in jail serving time because somebody hijacked meaning and sent them off to a particular place on January the 6th of a certain year. Some of those people were loonies. Yeah, but you know what? There's loonies go to church. You'll find some loonies too. There's loonies everywhere. Many of them were just decent people who got hijacked into an idea. Some of them didn't do anything that was violent or crimeful. They just showed up and they're serving time. Now, do I think some of those people should be serving time? Absolutely, I do. But for showing up, I don't know. No, not so much. Right. But somebody hijacked the meaning for them of the emotional source code of America and took them down a path. And as a result, they behaved in ways that are base level for who they are. So the person who controls the meaning controls the movement of the tribe. And so when we're looking at branding and corporations and organizations and cultures, what is the meaning we are associating to ourselves and that we are seducing people into coming along with? When you understand that, you have a lot of control and a lot of power. And we have an ethical responsibility to understanding how we're using that. Anatomy of meaning is just one part of the 5 parts of our emotional source code.
Wow, that's powerful. When you realize that there is a mass sort of, I don't want to call it brainwashing, but it's indoctrination. Doesn't matter which side you're on. Look around and ask yourself, is this groupthink? Am I following orders from an individual, or the group is part of this? And is this healthy for me and my psyche? I think is also another part of it.
But the pause there is this. Most people don't get to that question. Why? Because they're desperate to belong, and they'll trade their authenticity for approval, and they'll trade belonging for fitting in. So they go, well, I get to fit in here, just like my mate Tony, who fit in with the neo-Nazis, but he had to disenfranchise so many beautiful things about himself. And it's only since he got rid of that he could belong. So it's really understanding that. It's questioning, is this aligned with and I'm going to use this term and it might put you off, and that's okay, but is it aligned with my soul? Like if I'm on my deathbed, am I going to feel all right about this? Not about being right about it, but I'm going to feel like I stepped into my greater humanity in this. I might feel like I was right, but is that the same? It's not.
Is this aligned with my soul? That's heavy. That's heavy. Because
it's responsible.
Yeah. Wow. Because if you're sitting on your deathbed, are you going to be proud of some of the things you did? Are you going to be proud of what you believed in? Bigger picture, man. I love that. So you place meaning behind things, tribes.
We want, like I said, we want to belong. It's in our nature. It's part of our DNA. We had to survive inside of tribes. Mm-hmm. And if you got excluded from the tribe, that meant you'd probably be breakfast for some creature because you're outside of the tribe. So it's in our DNA. But instead of just finding the place where we can be part of, where we can fit in, it's like, you know me, Brad. I love pretty shirts. And
oh, yeah.
I'm famously known for my pretty shirts. And I like to buy lots of nice shirts. And when I buy a shirt, I have a rule that I got to get rid of one. Why? Because I don't want to fit a shirt in the closet because it will get wrecked and crumpled and disoriented. I want to create a space where it belongs. So I give pretty shirts away too. But the point is not whether I give the shirts or keep the shirts. The point is that if there's not room for you in all of your glory, you don't belong. You've disenfranchised, you've distorted in order to fit in. And if you're fitting in, you've got to keep certain things quiet. So I don't keep anything quiet. I'm not willing to say, I'm not going to say that here. Last week, I was working with a corporation down in Tennessee who are hardcore Christians. It's part of their culture.
Yeah.
And one of the guys, and the CEO is a private client of mine, and one of the guys said, do you have a problem supporting us as a faith-based organization? And I said, why don't you ask your boss? Because he's faith-based, and I helped him to design this culture around being faith-based. And they go, and this person said, but you're not Christian. I go, what's that got to do with anything? If it's aligned with your soul, I'll support you in it, no matter what you are. I'm not here to judge you on it. I don't have to go down that path, but I can support you being true to your soul. But I will also challenge you when you're doing something and calling it Christian, and it's a long way from the teachings of Christ, because I happen to have studied it and probably know it better than you, even though it's not my faith. Wow. And they're like, oh, okay. So at the end of the training, I said, did anything I say interfere with your faith? And 2 of the people said, no, but it sure as heck challenged us. It made me look deeper into why I do the certain things, and I call it Christian, and it's not. And I said, thank you. That's the job. Make you go deeper into your own authentic, soulful self so that you can show up in the world, show up in your business, show up in your service in a way that is soulfully present.
Wow. Reach out to Dove, ladies and gentlemen. If you're a corporation or an individual, you want to get better at what you do, you want to challenge yourself, you want to step it up a notch, please reach out to Dov Baron at dovebaron.com. You remind me of Daryl Davis. I don't know if you know this, but Daryl is a phenomenal musician. I'm trying to get him on the show.
I've interviewed Daryl. And
story,
by the way, he's a really good friend of Tony's.
No kidding.
The neo-Nazi guy. They're very good friends.
Tell him to do my show, because I've talked to his people and they are circling around. I really want to get him on the show. But what I loved about Daryl is he got 200 white men to quit the Ku Klux Klan by sitting down and having a kitchen table conversation one-on-one with these people. And he's a black man who is fearless as far as I'm concerned. This was just fearless is all I can say. With conversation, with rapport, he got them to quit the Klan. And this reminds me of this. Daryl is amazing. I'm glad you know him.
Well, but by the way, one of the KKK Grand Masters, he is godchild to one of that man's grandchildren. Isn't
phenomenal.
that cool?
That is cool.
Black guy. And by the way, Daryl is not, a beigey black guy. He's a full black guy.
Yeah.
Grown up in black music, and that's how he met the Klan, by playing instruments. And he's a phenomenal musician who holds nothing back from the fact that he's a black guy, but doesn't come at it from you're bad or you're good. He comes at it from, you don't know me.
You don't. What do we have in common? Yeah. What do we have in common?
And the rapport for him. So for me, it was Monty Python. The rapport for him is music.
Yeah.
He uses that leverage point in all of his conversations. That's the leverage point. What do we have in common musically? Oh, well, yeah. Well, I like music too.
That's funny. When you were saying you like pretty shirts, it felt like a Monty Python sketch. I like pretty shirts, I do.
They're lovely, aren't they? Look at them.
When you said the parrot sketch.
What is he wearing?
Yeah. When you said the parrot sketch, it instantly went back. I was a teenager in the 70s, and we're sneaking to watch Monty Python at 11:30 at night, because that's the only time it would come on the Thames, the broadcast. And so the next day I'd be in the orchestra pit, and John Heisey would go, "Oh, I paid for a good argument," and he would start doing this, and we'd all start doing it, to the point that our orchestra director would yell at us. But we had our favorites. And then in college, I went to see. We got on the bus, and we made it just in time to get to the theater, but there were no seats left to see Monty Python's History of the World.
Oh yeah.
And so we get up in the balcony, and it turns out it was one of those old-fashioned balconies that went way close to the screen, and we had the best seats in the house. I've never laughed so hard. But Monty Python, ladies and gentlemen, if you're not aware of it, they were the comedy troupe from England that basically got into our zeitgeist somehow and became part of our culture as well. So I love this. I love that we're having a conversation about.
You see, they were the first to challenge what we held as traditional and good, right? And they challenged politics before anybody had challenged politics. They challenged manners. They challenged all the things that make us fit in, and challenged us to examine that. And to this day, John Cleese, who lives in Nevis now, travels and speaks, and he talks about exactly that, and still challenges the authoritarian voices of politics and of leadership.
I agree. And I think we should do more of that. My ex-wife is from the Caribbean as well, and she used to always sit down and watch certain programs with me. One of them was South Park, because her nephew loved that show, and we would help him break it down so he understood that this is bigger than just a bunch of cartoons and jokes. And she looked at me once and she said, "I like this show because here in America, you really don't have any satire that mocks the government or mocks certain, big classic set in stone ideas. And South Park does that." And I thought to myself, wow, she's so right. And in other countries, they have this. We don't seem to be able to mock things here in America quite the way
Well, the
England
answer
does.
to it is this. If you want to understand America, because I wrote the emotional source code for America, and if you want to understand the emotional source code of America, America is an adolescent.
Yeah.
It's a teen whose highest value is freedom, like all teens, right? And so it's about, it's a teen, and teens are not very good at laughing at themselves. Whereas England is an old institution that is like lived long enough to go, God, we're full of shit. The French can also do the same, right? There are many other countries who make great fun of themselves because they're old enough to do that. But if you're an adolescent, you can't make fun of yourself. You don't even understand that concept. You just want to be right. And so politically, that's what shows up. Comedically, that's what shows up. And when I hear a comedian who can make fun of America and still say, I'm an American and I'm proud to be an American, but we need to poke fun at this because we take ourselves way too bloody serious. And that's why, by the way, in America, you love foreign comedians, right? You love Trevor Noah, and you love, these Aussies and Brits who come in because they bring that. They bring that sense of humor of poking fun at. And so it's like, well, it's not one of ours poking fun at it. Yeah. Well, we need to do that. Like, look, if you can't look at yourself and make fun, like I am the funniest joke there is in my reality, because I'm so full of shit when I look at things about how I was in my 30s.
Yeah.
Double that age. And I'm like, wow, I actually thought I was on path there. Like I was such an arrogant knob.
Yeah.
That's what you got to be able to do yourself.
I think we all do. I think it's healthy. When you can,
very healthy. Psychologically, it's very healthy.
Yeah. I mean, I look back at myself like you did, and I just am like, man, I was a jerk. I really was. Thought I was hot stuff. Thought I knew everything. I don't know squat anymore.
And that's what makes you wise. Yeah. You don't get to wisdom until you understand you know nothing.
Yeah.
I know nothing. Like you talked about that slither of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
I traveled the world to study with great masters. I've studied all these different subjects, and guess what? I know nothing. I sit down with quantum physicists. I sit down with neurosurgeons and neuroscientists. I sit down with politicians, and it's always like, what am I here to learn? Not what am I here to share? What am I here to learn? What can I learn? I was just invited into a very private mastermind of 10 people when I had the leading expert in the world. She has 60,000 samples on leukemia. And we talked about philosophy. We talked about poetry and her understanding of Islamic poetry. And it was so magnificent. And it fuels her search for the answer to how do we cure leukemia. We talked about grief and how grief is this rocket fuel for her, whereas grief mostly puts us in bed and puts a blanket over our head and we don't want to climb out. For her, and you can see the tears in her eyes as she speaks, because she's so soulfully connected to this, that the grief of having to say to a young man or a young woman, we can't do a damn thing for you, empowers her to do more every day. And she's telling me this, she's telling the group this with tears in her eyes, and it fuels her every day to get up at some ungodly hour and work till late in the night to do the things she does, because it matters more than her. And that's what meaning is. That's what real meaning is. It's you fighting for something that's bigger than you, that will make a difference, that will outlive you. My purpose is to impact the lives of people who will never know my name and whose name I will never know, because I don't matter. What matters is the work. What matters is the difference. That's where we got to get to. And if we're focused on being bloody right about being on the right or about being on the left, you're just an asshole. You're not anything good. You're being an asshole. And I know I'm not supposed to say that. I'm supposed to be nice and new agey and loving. You're being an asshole. And the interesting, wonderful thing about that is you don't have to be. You can give it up. It's a shitty hobby. Give it up. Embrace other people who don't believe what you believe and discover what you can learn. Let the grief of your own need to be right fuel you in saying, I'm going to grieve that. I'm going to feel that, like, every day I'm pulled towards being right. I'm going to be in grief of that. And I'm going to use that to have a deeper level of compassion and understanding. What would happen to your world? Not the world, your world. It would transform. And your world can impact many worlds, in the words of Hugh Everett III.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dov Baron, please reach out to him. Start listening to his podcasts, Leadership and Loyalty and Curiosity Bites, which I love. Dov, thank you so much for being on Awakened Nation, my friend. This time is going really fast. Go to his website, dovbaron.com, and email him, dov@dovbaron.com, D-O-V. You're not going to get away yet. I have my lightning round to ask you questions, but I really want to thank you for being on the show, my friend. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Always an honor, Brad. I love chatting with you. Thank you.
Thank
you for the space.
So let's dive in a little bit. I have a couple of questions for you. First of all, what's your favorite Monty Python movie?
My favorite Monty Python movie has got to be The Life of Brian.
Yeah.
And I particularly love Biggest Dickus character.
Yes.
Right.
Are you making fun of my friend Biggest Dickus? Yes.
Biggest Dickus with his lisp. I love Monty Python, so it's not hard.
I like there's two, Life of Brian and History of the World.
History of the World's fantastic too.
I mean, there's so much brilliant fodder in there, especially the opening scenes of birth, and they go, hurry up, put on the machine that goes ping, because the hospital administrator was coming down the hall and they wanted to see that they were spending money. You know what I mean? It was like birth, and then they don't give a kid a crap about the kid. They throw the kid to bin. The administrator's happy, and then he leaves, and the woman's laying there going, "Hello." She's there alone in the dark room. So, one of my favorites as well. And this is my second question. What is your favorite memory?
That is easy. My favorite memory is taking my wife as a surprise home. My wife was born in Fiji. She came to Canada when she was 10. And when we got married, she was in her mid-late 30s. And back in those days, it was before 9/11, you could do all kinds of things to get on a flight without all the problems you have today.
Yeah.
And I was able to take her to Fiji without her knowing. And it wasn't until the last leg of the flights from Hawaii that she knew where she was going. And when I said, well, babe, I'm taking you home, and her face lit up, and just that moment combined with the moment when her and I are in Fiji, and she meets this Fijian man who was a native Fijian. And he says, because she's a brown girl, are you from here? And she says, yes. And he called her sister in Fijian. And watching her face and watching her just melt at coming home was just like, wow, that's something that will stick with me forever.
That's beautiful. You old softy, you. You're romantical.
That's me. I'm a romantical.
My last question, and you're a complex man. You've been on multiple adventures. You delve deep into everything you touch. Is there a reason why? What's that?
This is true.
Is there a reason why you go at 100% on everything?
That's a really great question. So I think that the answer is twofold. At the surface level, the answer is my religion is curiosity. That is why. It's my religion. If you look up the word religion, it comes from religulus, right? Which is that which you bind yourself to. I bind myself to curiosity. I'm bound to it. It is my life's blood. And because it saved my life.
Yeah.
It saved my life, being born where I was born, in the situation I was born into. Even after I fell and all those things, it was curiosity that saved my life. Curiosity is the path to knowledge, but it's also the path to love. So that's one of the reasons. And the other reason is this, that as a kid, up until I was 28, about 27, 28, I was completely convinced I was an idiot. I was convinced that I was thick, British term. And I think at that point, my ego drove me to want to learn more to prove that I wasn't thick. And so that drive to learn more up until that time was really a way to emotionally protect myself from looking like an idiot. I turned it around into being something very deeply soulful. But by then it had already become deeply habitual for me to dive into that place. The reason I go to 100 miles an hour and 100 feet deep is because what drives me is to serve. And if I can't serve you, I am always willing to point you in the direction of who or what can. So if I don't go deep enough, then there's a chance I'm not going to be able to serve you, even in saying you need to go here or there.
The amazing, always going at 100%, Mr. Dov Baron. Thank you for being on Awakened Nation, my friend.
It's my pleasure and honor. Thank you so much, Brad. Loved the conversation. Thank you for opening doors into parts of a conversation that I don't normally get to have. And I sincerely appreciate it. And as I said, I hope your listeners enjoy it. But, again, please make sure that you rate, review, subscribe to Brad's show, and make sure you share it with others, because we want to hear from you what you got out of it. Doesn't matter if it's just information. The transformation is the application. So what are you going to do? Tell us what you're going to do. It matters.
Action, baby. Thank you so much, Dov. Thank you. Hey, everybody, tune in next week here on Awakened Nation. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for being a big part of the Awakened Nation movement. This is how you can help me and our extraordinary guests. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And let's grow this movement by word of mouth. Our success will be because of you. Thank you, and see you next week.